What is up? It's a Figure Hunter, and today we're going to look at the best apps for the Apple Watch users to be able to track your training load and rigor over time, as well as your wellness and recovery for training or for general life over time. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please consider subscribing for more. It is March 2023, so there's probably other apps that may be evolving out there. And there's been so much discussion over people now looking at the Apple Watch Ultra because it has 2 to 3 days of battery life as a possible contender for a sports, like a true sports watch, because of some of these apps that are now available. Before we get into the apps themselves, so what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about one setting you have to adjust to make the apps useful or worthwhile when it comes to wellness and recovery. We're going to talk about slightly with that is one issue you have to be aware of and have to do some manual adjustments on a daily basis. And then 3, we're going to talk about the apps themselves. We're going to talk about like 3 primary ones, 3 sort of that focus on some subset of training or wellness and recovery, and then 2 new ones that are now on the market today. So with that, let's look at the primary first before we get into any of the apps. One setting you have to adjust in Apple Health for the Apple Watch to track one primary metric called HRV. Let's take a look. All right, a quick note about how to turn on the heart rate variability tracking to be much more frequent. Basically, it goes from every 2 to 3 hours to every 15 minutes or so. So you have to go into AFib. I don't know, I've activated AFib history on mine already, so I don't know where you necessarily find this in the first drop down, but here at the bottom, when you first go in, if it's naturally, and it will be naturally turned off, you go in and you turn it on, and you have to verify or say that you have seen a doctor and the doctor has described that you have an AFib issue, and then it will create more heart rate variability tracking measures, which is the primary metric for a lot of apps to track your health and wellness. Secondly, there is an issue or a problem with the HRV tracking on the Apple Watches because they don't declare that they are providing accurate continuous heart rate variability tracking. They just declare that they're tracking AFib so if you go into like Athlytic, which is using heart rate variability to determine your recovery in any day, you can see it's 29 milliseconds, and that determines my recovery of 57%. But what I found is in the heart rate variability tracking, when you turn on AFib and you're getting all these extra measurements, is that some of the measurements are erroneous. So if you look at last night, so you see these lowish variables, but you go through and then as you track, you see right there in the middle, 112. That's way off the trend line, and it is definitively inaccurate because it's 4 times or 3 times the projected. So you delete that, and then you keep looking, and there's a 77. Maybe that's good, but it's also not in line with all the other measurements. None of the other measurements are anywhere close to that. So let's just say we delete that. So, okay, we've kind of cleaned it up. And now we have a different heart rate variability measure across last night because it doesn't have those 2 spikes, which are erroneous. And then if we go in and we reopen Athlytic, it now has put my recovery score about 10%, or maybe it was 57 before, I can't remember, but my reading is now down to 25 milliseconds and my recovery is down to 47%. So it's a pretty significant difference because the Apple Watch is tracking a few different minor erroneous HRV values overnight. So that's super important to know, but turning on your AFib to get the greater number of HRV measurements is fundamentally important for any of these apps to have at least some baseline of data to work off of. All right, again, today we have 35 milliseconds, 74% recovery. Go into the data points and you look up the line and there's one erroneous at 106. So we delete that and then we close Athlytic back out and then reopen it. And it's gone to 33 milliseconds and 68%. So it's about a 6% differential from what it was. So slight difference. Okay, so now for the apps. And just like I talked about, we're going to look at 8 apps. The first 3 are somewhat comprehensive when it comes to training and wellness recovery. The next 3 are either focused on training, load over time, or recovery specifically. And the last 2 are just new and sort of in testing or in development, but comprehensive or noteworthy or worthwhile or have some promise, to really be worth considering looking at and just sort of keeping an eye on over time. So we're going to start at the top with the most comprehensive, probably most widely used app for the Apple Watch to replicate some aspects of training, recovery, wellness, your sleep analysis, those types of things, and that is Athlytic. Let's dive in. All right, so Athlytic. This is the primary app that you want to consider or look at because it does the most comprehensive review of all the different data points that you would get automatically with the Garmin, but it sort of replicates what Whoop would look like. So like we talked about in the HRV, or the activation of greater HRV measurements, it takes your HRV from the last night and it estimates your recovery level. And then it also evaluates your workouts based on how hard they were, as well as it gives you recommendations for the amount of time you would need based on previous workout types to hit your overall suggested strain level for the day. They've also added this cool function down at the bottom, the stress tracking, which is something you can actually display on your Apple Watch watch face, which gives you an estimate of how your stress has been at any point in time. So you can see if your day is stressful or not. It's based on measurement as well as HRV, as well as just heart rate metrics. So I'm not sure exactly all the factors that go into it, but it has been following somewhat Garmin's body battery, which is the best physiological metric on the planet. But it is not totally accurate because I have not been that stressed throughout the day. I don't know that I would have said I ever hit a red point. But in other times, in tracking it and just generally sort of eyeballing it, it looks like it's done pretty well. And then you have your sleep score, which does pull the data from the Apple Watch, as well as it takes the sleep stages from the Apple Watch, which gives you the primary benefit here of the restorative sleep, which I look at that as sort of an evaluation of last night's sleep, not just based on time. And then it gives you your trends over time. I also really love that it gives you the sleep debt calculation. I have not gotten a lot of sleep. It has been a terrible week at work, and I've worked into the night very late and gotten very low amounts of sleep. So you can see my sleep debt has skyrocketed. And then energy levels, just how many calories you burned. So if you look at the next thing in this bottom tab, health, this is the other metric I go to just to look at it. Resting heart rate was elevated. I would say that that's absolutely right from last night, because yesterday's workout was terrible. I felt terrible. It was 3 days of 4 to 5.5 hours of sleep, and I just felt very off. And so I can see that some of the metrics are off. Otherwise, it gives you the range of this previous 30 or 60 days to see how the last night's metrics fall into play. You can see your trend lines over time, heart rate variability getting better or worse, which is usually a relation to fitness getting better, or training being lighter so that your heart rate variability is higher, or training being heavier, heart rate variability going down lower. You can track all these different metrics. And then you can see some of the trends with your exertion versus your recovery against each other. And then in the workouts tab, it's okay. It just gives you an exertion score, very much like Whoop. It's just very much the same. It gives you the heart rate snapshot, but then evaluation of the exertion level of that workout and how much time you spent in each zone, as it pulls the information from Garmin, or pulls the information from your Apple Watch, pulls the information from wherever it pulls it from. So here, this was tracked from Polar Flow, so a chest strap connected to Polar Flow. And everybody's using the chest strap, so they're all going to be basically the same. So it just gives you an exertion level, but currently they don't offer like a training load evaluation over time. You just get this metric of how much you worked out versus previous time. So that is Athlytic. The next one I look at is Chipr, Chipr. I really think this is another really good app for a summary of information. So you see your overall activity level. See, I haven't worked out today, and in my exertion score on Athlytic, it said 0. And this activity is just based on just moving around today, as well as the recovery. We'll look at each one of them specifically. So you see at the top, so here you just have your basic information, but the training zone, recovering. So that's actually sort of accurate. It has been lighter because I've been working extra heavy. So activity just says no workouts, but it's giving me some activity score based on just the amount of movement I've had today, which I like. And then the recovery, you can see all your variables. So heart rate variability, this is what's going to come from the Apple Watch. Tracking that HRV, which is why you have to turn AFib on, which is why you have to take out the high measurements, because it was higher than this when I first went in. It was 30. So it gives you your basic summary of information, but the two primary things just being heart rate variability and resting heart rate, and then a recovery score based on all of these things together. And then the sleep is fine. It's 92% based on
the amount of sleep that I need, 8 hours, 13 minutes. So it's not giving you a sleep score based on the quality of your sleep. It's just giving you a percentage based on the estimated amount of sleep you need, like Whoop does, which I don't find that to be the proper way to assess a sleep score. But either way, you can see 92% of the amount of time you needed to sleep. And then back to the overview. You can see a charts tab, so your activity scores, so like how much overall activity. I really like, again, how they evaluate activity. It's not based on a strain score from an individual workout. It's based on the activity throughout the day, plus any strain scores from any particular workouts. I think that's a good evaluation for just how busy you were and how it's all together summarized or culminated to be how much effort you put in throughout the day. And then recovery scores is just based on the HRV. You can see good recovery scores over the weekend and good sleep, and then bad recovery scores or yellow recovery scores. You can see your heart rate variability tracking. Didn't have the Apple Watch on, or it died in the middle of the night because the Apple Watch, at least Series 7 sucks for battery life. Resting heart rate scores. This is pulling it in from other devices because other devices are able to write to Apple Health. And then your sleep trends over time. You can see, Monday, terrible, but the rest, because the Apple Watch died or didn't have it on or whatever, it didn't pull in the actual sleep amounts. But either way, if you were using this, wearing your Apple Watch every night, it was going to give you good information. So you can see a weekly summary of all these metrics over top of each other: activity, recovery, and sleep. Again, very much like Whoop. So Chipr is a fantastic app in general. So I really like that it gives you this summary of information. You can see recovery is 48%. Athlytic had my recovery at 47%. So very much in line, but this just gives a little bit of very better evaluation of the busyness of your day through the activity evaluation, where it's giving you credit for just how busy you were, despite not just counting workouts. And it also gives you this training zone recovering, which, it is based on recovering optimal and high exertion, just based on trends over your last week of training. Again, that's a feature that Athlytic isn't giving you some sort of an estimate for your training load or what training zone you're in. All right, so this is gentler streak. So the main landing page just has some simple information. It just summarizes your activities down at the bottom, and we'll look at that in a second. But the main thing, or one of the main things it provides, is this sort of training load graph. So you can sort of see this evaluation for what your training load is, and then the green range is what your training load historically has been. So you want to keep it in the green. You can push it up to the dark green. If you want to push your body to a new level, you got to push your current training at a higher level than previous average trainings. So you can see, you go into the workout, it just gives you a summary. It's nothing fantastic. It's just similarly summary of heart rate zones. But the other feature, so it gives you this training load. So that's, like point number one. It gives you this training load over time and tells you if you're in the right direction. It actually will tell you if you're overtrained. It'll warn you to take rest days as well if you need to. And then you have the health screening section. So again, a summary of your last night's snapshot to determine whether you're normal, above normal, or below normal. So your trends over time with these basic piece of information, whether it's resting heart rate, sleep duration, heart rate variability, respiratory rate, oxygen saturation. So again, just sort of a simple snapshot. So Gentler is great for a simple snapshot of health metrics and a simple snapshot of training load and projected goals you would set for training load if you want to push it higher, or it will tell you, if you need to take time off.
Okay, so you can probably tell from those three, Athlytic is the most comprehensive. Chipr is also very comprehensive, and Gentler Streak is somewhat comprehensive. So now these middle three, the first two focus on training load evaluation over time to see if your current training load is enough to improve your fitness. And then the last is going to look at specifically training readiness. One app that can give you an evaluation for training readiness to go into the next hard workout. Let's start with the first of the two, which is HealthFit.
And now for HealthFit. HealthFit is just a great place to track your training load over time and estimate of strain. So here in the landing page, it's sort of silly. It just has all your workouts. And if you go into a workout, go in that same one, it just tells you basic information, but you can see at the bottom in the training load, it gives you a training load impulse score, which is just sort of an exertion score. So it helps you to see your overall, rigor of the workout, which is a primary piece to be able to have any app to be able to determine, how hard you pushed your body and if it was more on average of a hard push than other workouts. And you go in statistics, and this is where you get all the information. So here, actually it stopped. There you go. That's the landing page for statistics. And you can see your training load in general. This is just a volume of training, so it's not based on an exertion score, I don't believe. It's just based on the time amount of training versus previous averages. But again, you can see in general times, this just sort of, whatever, this sort of useless information, but the training load can just give you an idea of if your training this week is above or below the averages. But the primary thing is in this fitness section up at the top, because this is a true training load calculation. So it's based on like the rigor of the workout today and culminated with the rigor of workouts over the last 7 days compared to the rigor of the workouts over the last 28 days. And it'll give you that sort of background, here if you want to look at all the details. It's very similar to SportsTracker, which we'll look at in a second. So you can see your trends over periods of time. So there were times where I wasn't tracking workouts necessarily that would flow through to this, but you can see your trends over a long period of time. And if your blue line, that's the fitness level, is going higher or going lower, based on your fatigue and your form. Now the form is just, are you pushing your body to a new height? So if your form is negative, that means you're pushing your fitness higher. You can see it says CTL and ATL next, CTL next to fitness and ATL next to fatigue. So fatigue is the acute training load, which is the last 7 days, your score of the last 7 days. And the CTL next to fitness, the CTL is chronic training load, your longer term trend of how much training load your body can handle or has been under over and your acute training load pulls your chronic training load or your fitness level higher. So your recent rigor of workouts is what's pushing your body to new heights, and it's pulling that chronic training load higher. And so that's what you want to see over any period of time, is you want to see your recent and your last 7 days, you pushing yourself hard, and it's pulling the averages over a longer term period higher, which is your fitness level getting higher. So that is HealthFit in a snapshot. So you actually have these other health metrics you can dive into. Here you can get, summary of information. So the HRV, evaluations, a stress evaluation, which I haven't seen before. But either way, stress, saturation. So you can get your summary of information. It's just not all put together in a big, pretty way. It's just a long list, like, the Apple Watch more natively does in the health app. But I use this mostly for the training load tracking. All right, so this is SportsTracker, again, for training load tracking almost exclusively. So, you do a workout. This will only take workouts that are tracked through the app or through the app on your watch or through the Apple Watch workout app. So if you track a workout through any other app, it's not going to flow through to here, and it's not going to give you any metrics. So when you get a workout, you do the workout, it basically gives you this stress score in the middle right, the TSS, training stress score. That's your score. That's your rigor evaluation. Obviously, it gives you your zones and your heart rate graph based on however you tracked it. But your rigor score is what determines your estimates for growing your fitness or not growing your fitness. Then you have your recovery time. That's usually about half of recovery time that it should be. I don't know why, but it just is always super low regardless of the difficulty of the workout, or super low relative to the workout. And then you go into just what we looked at in HealthFit. So again, you just have your chronic training load, which is evaluated as your fitness level, your acute training load is your fatigue level over the last few days, and then your form. So if form's negative, you're pushing your fitness higher, and your trend line and the fitness will continue to go up. Again, I didn't have workouts flowing into here for a while, so if you looked over a longer period of time, you would see I was using it much more frequently, and now I'm rebuilding my chronic training load so that it's given me a higher fitness score. But this is still, a really good place to look for how your volume of training, not just the volume of time, but the actual volume of rigor, is pushing your fitness to a higher level, and you can see it sort of mathematically evaluated for you. All right, so now I have training today. So training today basically just takes some of your physiological metrics and evaluates your readiness to go hard, and it scores it, 0 to 10. So it basically, from what I assess, this bottom graph will show your trend of readiness. So I think it's primarily driven off HRV, but it just gives you a simple snapshot or a insight into how hard you could go based on your body being worn down or not being worn down, based on it pulling the physiological metrics from Apple Health. So again, a lot of it primarily driven off HRV or resting heart rate. So it says I can push hard today, but you can see your trend line over time. And if you're wearing your Apple Watch continually and you're constantly flowing through these data bits of HRV because you turned AFib on, you're going to be able to have this more clearly assess. I think this is a really simple app. It doesn't, in my mind, it's not very easy. Like if I touch anything on the screen, it like gets weird. But it's just a simple snapshot looking at one set of physiological metrics to determine if you're ready to go hard in a workout that particular day, and seeing a trend line in your overall training readiness over a longer period of time.
Now, looking at these last two, these are sort of new to the scene and can offer some promise. They're both sort of comprehensive in nature. Neither quite accomplish all the training load aspects as well as the recovery and wellness aspects, but mostly focus on the recovery wellness. With that, let's dive into the first is Onvy.
All right, and this is Onvy, Onvy. So it just has a lot of information about the AI that goes into it. I have found this to be a lot more glitchy of an app because you see at the top it says sleep data processing complete. That usually doesn't work super great. It usually takes a long time, and I don't know what the problem is for them to evaluate it. So it gives you this summary. I think it's I like the way this overall looks, and we'll look at some other scores and statistics that I like how they make it appear. Whether it's true or accurate, I don't know. So recovery score is just based on the sleep score, duration, and your overall sleep need based on history of sleep you've gotten. The readiness score based on HRV and resting heart rate. I think those are great measures for readiness. It's saying that my readiness is long, and I don't know where that 18 came from. I don't know if it pulled it from Whoop, maybe. So the HRV is not flowing directly from Apple Health, so or maybe it's based on a different range of Apple Health scores. But either way, I like what they're doing with how they're summarizing your recovery based on sleep and HRV and resting heart rate. And I think this is a great approach. I don't know exactly if what their data they're pulling is the way it should be. And then you go into scores at the bottom tab. So scores in the bottom tab will give you 4 quadrants, 4 basic things: recovery, activity, mindfulness, and stress. So this recovery, you can see that it's recovery is based on sleep and readiness is based on HRV and resting heart rate, and sleep is based on sleep debt and sleep duration. I think that's great. I think this is awesome. A lot of times I'll go into this maybe like an hour after I've woken up, and these scores won't have all populated. They won't all be there. And then I'll go back in. The sleep won't have processed yet. So again, it's glitchy, but I really like it. So you can see the recovery is based on readiness and sleep, and then you can see readiness is based on those 2 factors, and sleep's based on those 2 factors, and then you get further and you can see the factors. You can see your sleep duration time, your sleep debt, and then your HRV and resting heart rate, and then your respiratory rate thrown in there for good measure. But a lot of times, it just this information isn't always always populated. The data is just not there, even a pretty good amount of time after you've woken up. But I really do like how they're approaching these things. I really do like the tidbits of scores that they culminate into summaries of certain category scores, and then how that flows into recovery scores. So activity, you can see that's based on certain things. It's got workout strain built into it. But boom, I didn't work out today. So if we go in yesterday, it'll show the workout strain based on what? Workout duration, and then workout intensity. So workout intensity, I don't see that as a column I could evaluate, but it does give you a fitness score, workout duration and workout strain over a period of time. So again, great stuff in my opinion, like how they're sort of getting information. It's just, not totally clear where they're exactly basing their information on. And then stress score is based on your heart and ambient noise. So here's your ambient noise score. But again, giving you a stress evaluation at any point in time based on, elevated heart rate or loud noises. So again, Onvy has a really good backbone for how they present information and a great backbone for how they pull information together to give you recommendations or estimates or scores. So I just hope they continue to improve. And Welltory, boy oh boy, does it have a lot of information. It is giving you a snapshot every time the Apple Watch takes a measurement. It's giving you a snapshot of stress high, energy low, health evaluation. So you can go into this, and this is just chock full of information. I think they could make the information not so lengthy. It's just, there's so much. So let's just look around at the app. It's got so much you could take information from. So your SDNN, your heart rate, your mean RR, your RMSSD. I mean, it's just like, what do I do with all this information? I mean, it's getting you some, I mean, it's giving you a lot of information. You can see that each of these little charts is based on like little points in time. Whenever there's a score taken from the Apple Watch, it's flowing through to like what they evaluate in all of these metrics. And you can see it just continues on and on. So it does give you a sleep score. So you can see sleep insights, full sleep analytics, and the scores for those things. The amount of time REM, light, deep, and awake. So it's giving you the information that you would really pretty much want to have. It does it in a big lengthy format with, you know, estimates for the value of each piece of your sleep. And then you can see little different recommendations based on your heart rate variability. It says, this is what's happening. A strange storm is brewing. And I don't think it presents it in a way that makes it actionable or makes it kind of useful. You go into the top, you see at the top there's like a little scores tab. So we'll go there and you can see your heart. This is an evaluation of the latest, and it just gives you that same, sort of evaluation of each of these metrics. ANS balance, autonomic nervous system balance. But it's just so much, and it's not clearly directionable. But I share Welltory with everybody because it just goes into so much. And maybe this is information that over time would make sense. Um, okay, here we go, days. So we see what days looks like. HRV over days. Okay, good. So now we have some information that might look useful. Focus versus exercise minutes, ANS balance, just lots of information. Activity level, that's not that big a deal. Workouts, you can see your workouts over time, like how much time you spent in a workout. But again, it's not giving me like a strain score. The strength training kilocalories. Whoa, just so much information. So it does give you a lot of advice for meditation or how to connect to meditation apps and nutrition apps and your average weight and all these different things. It pulls every possible data point. And you can health journal, you can see a snapshot of how your overall health is looking over a period of days. But again, you go in there and it's like, oh Lord, there's just so much to look at. This is definitely the most comprehensive app I've ever seen at looking at everything times 1,000 different possible metric calculations. But definitely interesting one to track and follow and just see if it helps you to have any clarity.
And there you have it. There's the summary of the 8 apps that I think are most primarily useful or on the market today for using your Apple Watch for tracking training, tracking wellness. Obviously, I don't think, and there's a lot of debate about this, but I don't think any one of these accomplishes in any way what Garmin by itself accomplishes, or even a culmination of, if you're willing to go to 8 different places, does it as well, as polished, and as thorough as Garmin is doing it now. But the simple thing is that Apple Watch users really like Apple Watches. So you got to find a way to culminate and grab all this piece of information to have a clear picture on, is your training load, your training rigor enough to be pushing your fitness higher? Can it give you information about how, what you need to step it up in? Is your recovery ready to go into the next workout? Is your recovery doing well across the general platform or spectrum of life? And how ready to train are you? So as a suggestion, if you were going to try to look at a lineup, I would probably look at Athlytic or Chipr, sort of 2 primary options as your base. And then I would add training today as a snapshot into your training readiness to go into the next hard workout. and then add behind that SportsTracker for tracking your training load over time, your rigor development, your overall fitness development over time. So Athlytic or Chipr as your base overall unit, training today as a snapshot for training readiness, and then SportsTracker as a training load evaluation. So with that, please like this video if you found it to be useful or helpful. It's the Figure Hunter. Thanks so much for watching.